Thanks, everyone. I'm Kathy Janasie. I'm with the National Sea Grant Law Center, and so I'm going to talk today about a project we have, and we're in the very beginning stages of, and looking at comparing the state regulations of PFAS in the Great Lakes and Lake Champlain region. So you can advance, Sarah. And so for those of you who don't know us, the National Sea Grant Law Center is part of the Sea Grant Network. And when I want to introduce us, I just want to, emphasize that as lawyers with Sea Grant, that we're a neutral research center. We're not advocates. And so we do legal research that's helpful for the Sea Grant Network and our stakeholders, but we never take a position about whether a law should be passed by a state or a local government. We stay neutral and just kind of present our research in that manner. So next slide. We just wanted to thank very quickly our funding for this project. And so it's coming from Purdue University and NOAA. And then next slide, Sarah. And then as well as our project partners in this, which are Minnesota Sea Grant and Illinois, Indiana Sea Grant. So next slide. And so our project is looking at the regulation of PFAS in the Great Lakes and Lake Champlain regions. As earlier speakers today had talked about, the states in this region have taken activity to regulate PFAS, whether it's through drinking water regulations, fish advisories, firefighting foam bans. But the issue is in this region where we're sharing water resources, where pollution's crossing boundaries, those steps the states have taken have not been consistent. And so we wanted to propose a project where we would work with state regulators to start to try to get to a place where they could both learn what the other states and the regions are doing and talk about kind of what steps they could do to have more consensus in their regulation. So next slide, sorry. And so the process we do through this, we call it building policy consensus. But what the steps we're going to take is kind of look at the individual frameworks from each of the states, look at the differences between those, and then facilitate discussions with the regulators. And so this project is really going to be focused on, our team at the Law Center doing this legal research and comparison, and then working with the state regulators to talk about what we found, and then working with Minnesota Sea Grant and Illinois, Indiana Sea Grant to kind of do that outreach piece to kind of extend our findings. So next slide. And so the main three components of our project are a legal scan, a comparative analysis where we're going to look at kind of the different aspects of what's been passed in the region, as well as developing some case studies. So next slide. And so we're also, as I said, going to be engaging the regulatory community in the Great Lakes and Lake Champlain regions. And so our first webinar with them is actually next Tuesday, where we're going to, talk to them about our project and hopefully get them excited about their participation. But we also plan to be able to have them review and give us feedback on the products we're creating. So the legal scan, the comparative analysis, the case studies. And then we're also going to work with them later in the project in a series of virtual engagements to help them learn about what the other states are doing, and again, kind of talk about what they think kind of next steps for the region could be. Next slide. So our first objective is to complete a legal scan. And so when we're saying legal scan, this is the legal research step where we are going to be looking at kind of what the states have done on the books already. And so looking at laws, regulations, other kind of regulatory activities like a fish advisory, and other steps the states have taken at this point in time. Our first step to do this was to actually review the existing reports and databases that already exist because work has been done in this area before. And then from there, we're going to do other legal research to kind of fill in any gaps, anything that's been passed since those databases and reports have come out, and just see if there's anything else we can fill in to see what's happened. And then on top of looking at those actions, we're going to be also looking at key lawsuits in the region, in particular lawsuits that are challenging state regulation or local regulations, and not necessarily those bigger tort claims that we're seeing that have been talked about earlier, but really looking at the challenges to the actions the states have taken. And we're also going to be looking at federal actions, as well as tribal and Canadian provisions, because the states aren't the only regulators in this area of the country. And then we're going to compile all of these relevant provisions and case summaries and send them off to the state context that we have for each state for review to see if what we have is correct. So next slide. And so this is from another aspect of our project in Florida. It's not the Great Lakes, but this is just looking at kind of how we're compiling the different actions that are happening. So for example, here, we're looking at legislation that's been enacted. So what's the name of the bill? What's the year? What specific PFAS have been addressed? Because not all activities are looking at them as a whole group. The agencies that are responsible, and then just a short summary of the action. And then next slide. And this is just looking at some kind of other things we're looking at. And so executive orders, other kinds of state actions, so web pages, other kind of outreach materials that the state is doing, other white papers. So we're going to do a pretty comprehensive view about what's out there for each state. Next slide. And then just an example of a federal action, this was mentioned earlier, the EPA announcing that they've finalized their regulatory limits. So that's just something that else we're going to include in the legal scan, and then do an analysis of how it's comparing to the states that have taken action, specifically with drinking water standards. What's interesting about, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the EPA has announced this finalization. The rule has not been actually published in the Federal Register or finalized in that way. So we're still kind of waiting for the rule to be finalized, even though we know what limits EPA is going to be taking at this point in time. So next slide. So the second piece is a comparative analysis. And what we're going to do here is, once we get all the legal scan items together, we're going to try to categorize different characteristics, different types of actions, and then create a matrix to be able to, put it in a chart and be able to look at it in a more snapshot way, in a way that's more, feasible for comparison. And in this stage, we're going to create an advisory group that's going to be a smaller group of state regulators who are going to help us work through this piece. We've done this step in other projects where we were doing kind of the similar model of trying to get to a consensus point with regulators, and the regulators in those projects have thought it was really a helpful step. And so, it's an interesting and exciting kind of analysis to do for us. Next slide. And then finally, we're going to produce some case studies. And so with these, we're meant to kind of dig deeper into some, specific policy challenges that are happening in the region. So maybe it's litigation risk. So maybe a state has been sued by something that they've done. Maybe a state's done something pretty unique. Maybe there's a huge regulatory gap that we're not thinking about. And again, we're going to be asking the Sea Grant partners and state agency contacts to provide input at this stage in the project as well, to help us identify kind of a few situations that we want to highlight in a deeper dive in a case study. So next slide. And then our outreach team, as I mentioned, it's going to be us. It's going to be Minnesota Sea Grant, Illinois, Indiana Sea Grant, as well as a community engaged intern, that's going to work with us at the Law Center. And here we're just looking to translate and share the project findings to a wider group besides the state regulators who are going to be active with us throughout the project. So other policymakers, researchers, industry, community organizers, others. We particularly are hoping to reach underserved and underrepresented individuals and communities in the region to kind of let them know what's happening on the regulatory scene. And then next slide. And so that's all I had. Again, I'm sorry, my computer messed up and would not let me share. But I'm happy to take any questions from anybody at this point in time.
Sure, yeah, we have a couple minutes for questions. Well, it sounds like we don't have any at the moment. If anyone does have questions, you can connect with Kathy on Hoover.
All right, thanks everyone.